The prevalence of mental illness is a lot more common than one would think. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, approximately 1 in 5 adults experience a mental illness in a given year. That's 43.8 million people in the United States, or 18.5% of the U.S. population. Now this is the area where the incident occurred, right off of High Street and 11th Avenue. If you look a little further into the distance, you'll notice that this is all within walking distance to WKU's campus. I'm standing out in front of the Women's Studies Center, where Molly Kirby, professor for Gender and Women's Studies, spends the majority of her time. Let's hear what she has to say about possible oppression coming from the election results. The Warren County Sheriff's Office requires you to give your financial and personal information through these doors, but never over the phone. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of sex trafficking, visit this website to learn more on how you can get help. It is not uncommon to see young members of the community active in a church setting. What you won't know from first glance is that these kids are helping a local Bowling Green organization that brings awareness to human trafficking. Phoenix Rising is an organization that supports survivors of domestic sex trafficking through education, advocacy, and programs. Survivors that have experienced sex trafficking firsthand lead the organization. Survivor leader Vicki Patterson says her mother used to sell Vicki's body for child pornography.
I was the deep, dark secret. In the 50s, you didn't do the things that my mother did. She took me to hotels and motels to sit with men and resorts, and she's the one that put me in the child pornography.
According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, human trafficking is a growing problem in Kentucky. The hotline reports 64 cases in 2015 and 89 cases last year. The hotline states that human trafficking is considered a modern-day form of slavery and that many people aren't aware of just how common it is. BGPD says there were 2 cases of human trafficking in Bowling Green this past year. Patterson says she has struggled with mental illnesses since her days of sexual abuse.
I didn't start getting better until I was 55.
Patterson says she wants to give guidance and support to victims of sex trafficking, something that she was never given. Reporting for News Channel 12, I'm Christy Bollinger. WKU President Gary Ransdell responded to the University Senate's resolution to make WKU a sanctuary campus. A call like this may leave you $500 shorter than you were before. The Bowling Green Daily News reports that the latest phone scam that's taking place includes scammers posing as a worker for a law enforcement agency.
Hello.
They are calling Bowling Green residents, claiming that they've missed their jury duty and are being asked to immediately pay a fine of $500. The fine is to avoid having a warrant out for their arrest. The Warren County Sheriff's Office requires you to give your financial and personal information through these doors, but never over the phone. These scams are starting to hit home here at WKU. Students like Marley Jones have received these calls from phony law enforcement agents. She got the call one day while she was at work.
And then I started freaking out, but after being on the phone with them for 2 hours, they wouldn't let me hang up with them. I've never even had a traffic ticket, so I've never really talked to the police before, so I didn't know what was real and what wasn't real.
Marley says she had to leave work and go drive to see her mother to get the $500.
And I'm still on the phone with them. I have to tell them where I am when I reach a destination each time, which I thought was weird. But I was scared, so I did whatever they said.
Molly says that they then instructed her to drive to a Rite Aid, specifically an only Rite Aid, to get a money order.
Meanwhile, my mom is talking to one of her friends and talking to Cindy Crocker, who's a lawyer in town that's a really good family friend of ours. And that's when, Cindy alerted my mom, that's not how that works. That's not a thing.
Marley wanted to share her story to alert the community in hopes that no one else would fall victim to this scam. For News Channel 12, I'm Christy Bollinger. A body is found on a downtown Glasgow rooftop. According to the Glasgow police, the body was found on the roof of the Allstate building in the downtown square. An armed robbery took place in Bowling Green this past month on High Street. 28-year-old Jenny Van Buren is a resident of Bowling Green and has lived in the area for about 6 years. Jenny Van Buren had just gotten home from work when she went out to her car to retrieve something. When she turned around, a gun was pointed right at her head.
So I went out to my car. I sat down in my car. I reached over to grab something out of it. I turned around, and there were two guys and a gun pointed at me. And one of the guys was like, "Give me your keys." I said, "No." So the guy who didn't have the gun grabbed me out of the car, like yanked me out. So I just lunged at him.
Van Buren's concern is, what if this had happened to someone else and they hadn't had the courage to stand up and survive like she had?
Very conscious of my surroundings. But what if this had been somebody else who was just like, "Yeah, here's my keys." Like, what do you do in something like that? What if this was somebody else who didn't know what to do?
Now this is the area where the incident occurred, right off of High Street and 11th Avenue. If you look a little further into the distance, you'll notice that this is all within walking distance to WKU's campus. The BGPD's Public Information Officer, Ronnie Ward, had some advice on what you should do if something like this was ever to take place.
So it's just best not to resist, just to give them what they're asking for and let them go. But if you can, be a good witness. And what I mean by that is if you can get a description, anything that you can think of.
For News Channel 12, I'm Christy Bollinger. An armed robbery occurred at the Walmart on Morgantown Road. Police are looking for anyone who may have information about the incident. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses, a mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood. Bowling Green has their own NAMI location. Deborah Weed, president of NAMI, says one of the organization's main goals is trying to get rid of the negative stigma that follows a mental illness. The prevalence of mental illness is a lot more common than one would think. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, approximately 1 in 5 adults experience a mental illness in a given year. That's 43.8 million people in the United States, or 18.5% of the U.S. population. WKU has counseling services for students suffering with mental illness.
We do all kinds of issues like anxiety and depression, stress, relationships, eating disorders, trauma, homesickness, hearing the voices, suicide, you name it. And it is a confidential service for students. So what they say in a session stays in a session unless they are suicidal, homicidal, that type of thing, where it's a safety issue.
A WKU student here on campus is diagnosed with anxiety, and she says every day is a struggle.
So it really does mess with your emotions because you're not, you're like, why can't I be like everyone else? Why can't I just feel normal?
She shares a story of a time she felt really alone and insecure with her anxiety.
One day I was having an anxiety attack and someone was around me that I wasn't very close with, and they weren't used to it. I can tell that they've never seen it before and they didn't know how to deal with it. So it just made me feel really insecure.
She has some advice for anyone that's suffering with anxiety.
I mean, it gets better. Like, that saying really is true. Like, when people tell you it gets better, it does.
Reporting for News Channel 12, I'm Christy Bollinger.
Good evening, I'm Simone Young.
And I'm Christy Bollinger. Thank you for joining us tonight on News Channel 12.